Welcome back to another episode of Warren Cali. For decades, the West Coast Crips has been one of San Diego's most recognizable gangs. They formed in the 70s, making them one of Diego's oldest gangs. Police have been trying to bring them down for years. For example, in 2014, federal prosecutors unsealed a sweeping RICO indictment alleging that members and associates participated in a criminal enterprise involving drug trafficking, illegal firearms, robberies, witness intimidation, and multiple murders. The government alleged that the gang members maintained their influence through violence, intimidation, and organized criminal activity, leading to one of the largest gang takedowns in San Diego history. Several defendants were later convicted in federal court on racketeering conspiracy charges after prosecutors presented wiretap evidence, recorded conversations, and videos. This indictment led to 55 people being charged as well. Authorities seized more than 16 guns, including sawed-off shotguns, pistols, and revolvers, and many rounds of ammunition, plus 4 pounds of meth, 4 pounds of weed, and $300,000 in counterfeit bills, as well as being blamed for multiple murders. 12 years later, the West Coast Crips will face the same fate as they did in this indictment. For more than a year, federal investigators say a surveillance camera remained pointed towards a stretch of Imperial Avenue, just east of downtown San Diego. Day after day, the camera allegedly captured people approaching the area, briefly meeting with a suspected dealer, exchanging cash, and leaving with crack. According to the federal prosecutors, the operation was taking place in the open, around the 2900 block of Imperial Avenue, approximately a mile and a half east of Petco Park. By the time authorities announced the case on July 15 of 2026, they claimed that location had developed into a massive outdoor drug marketplace, allegedly controlled and staffed by members and associates of the West Coast Crips, a well-known gang in San Diego. The investigation first began in 2024. Federal authorities say the original focus was on suspected West Coast members believed to be trafficking narcotics and committing acts of violence in and around Imperial Avenue. What followed was described as a year-long multi-agency investigation involving court-authorized wiretaps, undercover agents, informants, extended video surveillance, and a whole ton of police work. Investigators were not simply attempting to document one hand-to-hand drug transaction. They were trying to take the whole organization down. They were attempting to identify the larger network, who allegedly supplied the drugs, who converted or prepared them, and who staffed the market, who collected money, who replenished inventory, and who purchased large quantities for the gang. Prosecutors stated the investigation eventually identified 3 broad categories. The first category consisted of street-level dealers accused of working directly at Imperial Avenue. These were the individuals prosecutors said met with customers, accepted cash, and provided quantities of crack. The second category consisted of alleged suppliers who provided powder cocaine that could be then converted to street sales. The third category consisted of purchasers who was allegedly buying crack at the market in large quantities and transported them elsewhere for resale. Authorities claim those purchasers helped extend the market's influence into other communities, including East Village, downtown San Diego, Logan Heights, Sherman Heights, and other surrounding areas. The government theory is that the defendants allegedly occupied different positions within a single distribution system. Some were accused of working at the visible end of the operation, where customers made purchases. Others allegedly operated further up the supply chain. Still others used the market as a wholesaling source before reselling narcotics in a different neighborhood. By charging this case as a federal drug conspiracy, prosecutors are alleging that the defendants knowingly agreed to participate in a shared plan to distribute cocaine and cocaine base, even though each person may have not personally handled transactions or even known the participant. Federal authorities claim the scale of the operation was enormous. Investigators estimate that approximately 20 pounds of cocaine was sold through the Imperial market every week. The government placed the estimated weekly street value no less than $550,000. If that estimate is accurate, the market maintained anything close to that pace over an extended period. The alleged operation has moved millions of dollars in narcotics during the course of a year, police stated. Authorities also claim thousands of customers repeatedly purchased cocaine at the location during 2025. According to the government's account, customers approached people staffing the market, paid in cash, and obtained crack cocaine in transactions that were frequently captured by the surveillance video. Prosecutors say the Imperial Avenue location functioned in 2 ways at the same time. First, at the retail level, where individual users could allegedly approach the market and buy quantities of crack for personal use, and at the wholesale level, where other dealers allegedly purchased large quantities of drugs and carried them to other parts of San Diego for redistribution. This allegedly allowed the location to operate as more than a neighborhood corner. In the government's description, it became a central distribution hub that supplied both users and small drug selling networks across the city. The indictment charged 30 defendants. The youngest named was 19 and the oldest was 76. The investigation relied heavily on surveillance. The Justice Department said that for most of the operation, a camera was trained on the Imperial Avenue market and recorded daily activity that investigators considered consistent with cocaine-based sales. One image identified by the government allegedly showed defendants participating in hand-to-hand transactions. Authorities also said they used wiretaps, and a wiretap is not the same thing as simply checking a suspect's public social media page or reviewing ordinary phone records. They had to get authorization to do the things that they did, which is intercepting private communications. Some of the wiretap conversations allegedly captured people discussing inventory and supply, and investigators claimed that the sellers also ran out of drugs and then searched for ways to replenish what they had been selling. In the government's view, those conversations helped demonstrate that the operation was active, organized, and dependent upon continuing the supply chain rather than occasional individual sales. Undercover agents and confidential sources were also used. Although the public announcement does not disclose every controlled purchase, or every confidential source, or even every undercover encounter, authorities still say these techniques form part of the investigation. The physical evidence described by authorities included more than 11 pounds of cocaine, which was seized during the investigation and the coordinated takedowns. Investigators also reported seizing more than 14,000, 2 handguns, and a money counting device. In this indictment, the maximum state punishment is life in federal prison. The Justice Department also identified a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years and a potential fine up to $10 million. That does not mean each defendant will automatically receive life or even necessarily receive the same sentence. The amount of time received will all depend on the individual, as well as his leadership role, how much drugs they put on him, and as well as the acceptance of responsibility in the trial outcome, as well as plea agreements and federal sentencing rules. The indictment opens the possibility of severe punishment, but the individual outcomes will be determined through later court proceedings.
This morning, federal prosecutors say in a major takedown of an open-air crack market just a mile and a half east of Petco Park. NBC7's Shelby Bremer is outside the federal building downtown. Shelby, prosecutors just detailed this operation. What have you learned?
Yeah, hey, Monica. Well, 28 people were arrested, and police are still looking for 2 people that they call fugitives named in this grand jury indictment. Now, this was a collaboration of the FBI, state, and local law enforcement, and they say that this investigation began in 2024, and it focused on alleged members of the West Coast Crips.
San Diego is a paradise, but it is not a gangster's paradise.
The feds say the West Coast Crips ran an open-air drug market at 2900 Imperial Avenue, where investigators believe thousands of people repeatedly bought cocaine base in 2025, averaging 20 pounds each week. Authorities say they wiretapped conversations, used confidential sources, and trained a camera on the market every day for more than a year. And as part of the operation this morning, law enforcement says they confiscated 11 pounds of cocaine, $14,000 cash, and 2 handguns. The feds say at least 22 of the defendants have prior felony convictions and are now charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine and cocaine base.
This was a bustling crack market operating with impunity and audacity, making millions of dollars a month, just a mile or two from Petco Park, the Gaslamp Quarter, downtown businesses, luxury condos, restaurants, hotels. You name it. It was a one-stop shop for addiction, violence, and human suffering.
Now, one of those defendants did appear in federal court this afternoon, and I had a chance to speak to some of his family members who said that they had no idea what was happening until they got a call that he had been arrested this morning. Several other defendants are expected in court tomorrow.
The government also highlighted the criminal histories of several defendants. According to the United States Attorney's Office, at least 22 of the 30 defendants have prior felony convictions, with many of those convictions involving drug sales. 5 defendants were reportedly under some form of post-conviction supervision when a new case was announced. Beyond the drug transactions, investigators say Imperial Avenue location was connected to the broader West Coast activity. Federal authorities described the annual gathering known as a Hood Day on March 30th, where they watched everyone the whole entire day on March 30th of 2025. The Justice Department included the set day gathering as a part of the larger context surrounding the alleged market. The government has attempted to connect the drug activity to the gang in the controlled area. The location was also connected to violence. On the evening of January 9th of 2026, according to authorities, a vehicle drove to the market and stopped in front of the area. An occupant allegedly stepped out and fired approximately 4 to 5 rounds toward the people gathered near the location, and at least 2 people were struck. The shooter then allegedly returned to the vehicle and then fled. After investigators spent more than a year gathering evidence, federal prosecutors presented this case to the grand jury. A grand jury does not decide whether the defendant is guilty. Its task is to determine whether the probable cause exists to formally accuse someone of a federal crime. The proceedings usually occur in secret, where prosecutors presented evidence without the defense attorneys participating in the same way they would at trial. When a grand jury approves the charges, the indictment remains sealed when authorities organize the arrest and the search warrants. On the morning of July 15th of 2026, the investigation entered the public phase. More than 300 federal and state local law enforcement personnel took part in the coordinated attack. The authorities executed 21 search warrants targeting homes and vehicles throughout San Diego. By approximately 1 p.m., 28 defendants have been taken into custody, while 2 remain wanted. United States Attorney Adam Gordon stated that San Diego was paradise, but not a gangster's paradise. FBI officials said the operation demonstrated the government's intention to target violent gangs affiliated with criminal networks. San Diego Police Chief characterized the investigation as part of an effort to keep the city safe, while representatives of Chula Vista Police Department and Homeland Security investigations emphasized cooperation between the agencies. The discovery process may eventually reveal the full scope of the government's evidence. That would include surveillance footage, intercepted communications, undercover recordings, laboratory reports, photographs, police reports, confidential source information, cell phone records, financial records, and evidence seized during the July 15 searches. One question would be whether the government can connect each defendant to the conspiracy. In a large conspiracy case, it is not enough evidence to prove that a defendant was present in a neighborhood, knew a suspected gang member, or even associated with someone who sold drugs. Prosecutors must generally establish that the person knowingly and intentionally joined the unlawful agreement. The government may be attempting trying to prove that the knowledge due to repeated transactions, intercepted conversations, observed conduct, drug quantities, and possession of sales materials. Another issue may be the amount of cocaine and cocaine base attributed to each defendant. The government's overall estimate of 20 pounds each week described the alleged market as a whole. Prosecutors may argue that the defendant should be held accountable for quantities responsibly foreseeable within the conspiracy. Defense attorneys may argue that their clients have smaller roles, which mean limited knowledge or no agreement with the broader group. Drug quantity can affect both mandatory minimums and sentencing guidelines, making it one of the most important factual disputes in a federal narcotics case. The government's alleged 3-part structure included street sellers, suppliers, and redistribution purchasers may also become important. Prosecutors are likely to argue that each group depended on each other. Suppliers may allegedly kept the market stock. Street dealers allegedly generated the direct cash sales, and redistribution purchasers allegedly expanded the reach of the market beyond Imperial Avenue. The defense may attempt to portray transactions as independent buyer-seller relationships, rather than proof of one shared conspiracy. Federal courts often distinguish between a simple sale and evidence that a buyer knowingly joined the larger distribution agreement. The indictment is therefore not merely about whether drugs were sold on 2900 Imperial Avenue. It's about whether the prosecutors can prove that 30 individuals knowingly participated in the same overall crime plan. It is also about whether the enormous figures announced by the authorities, being 20 pounds per week and over 500,000 in estimated weekly street value and thousands of customers, can be supported. Federal investigators describe it as an alleged outdoor marketplace, which was operating in plain sight, supplied through a network of powder cocaine sources, and staffed by street-level dealers, and was used by smaller distributors who carried crack cocaine into multiple San Diego neighborhoods. The government claims the market repeatedly sold out and required constant replenishment. It claims thousands of customers passed through during 2025 and 2026. It claims the block was connected to gang gatherings, territory identity, and violence. But despite the size of the operation and the confidence displayed by law enforcement, the indictment remains an accusation. Every defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. The photographs, intercepted conversations, seized narcotics, and surveillance recordings will only be authenticated and explained. Confidential sources may face cross-examination, and police procedures may be challenged. Every person accused will have to be judged based on the evidence connected to them, and not merely the reputation of the West Coast Crips or the government's description of Imperial Avenue. The full significance of this case will not be known until the evidence is revealed and the court process runs its course. For now, the indictment represents one of the largest recent federal gang-associated narcotics prosecutions in San Diego history, which was trying to bring down the West Coast Crips. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to like, hype, comment, and subscribe.